So I'm a Christian and I assume you're a skeptic. My goal is to explain why I think Christians are justified in thinking the Gospel of John relates true events in a truthful way. The fourth Gospel begins with a great deal of emphasis on the witness of John the Baptizer. All four Evangelists and the book of Acts prioritize the baptizer's historical role in certifying Jesus as Messiah. It's surprising, therefore, that John the Baptizer doesn't factor much into modern debates about the credibility of Christianity. After all, though John was a widely recognized and respected prophet among first-century Jews throughout the Roman Empire, it's not as though Gentiles knew much, if anything, about him. Yet their ignorance didn't deter any of the evangelists from emphasizing John's importance. So at some point, a serious investigation into Christian origins must confront the question of John the Baptizer. I'd like to propose the following evidence for concluding that the New Testament account of John the Baptizer is basically true. The Jewish historian Josephus, born around the time Herod executed John, describes the baptizer and his mission in similar terms as the Gospels, even adding John's familiar epithet, the baptizer. The biggest difference in Josephus' account is his suppression of John's messianic focus. Josephus didn't think too highly of later apocalyptic leaders who provoked a devastating and unwinnable war with the Romans, so his account clears John of any association with these later movements. Josephus and the Dead Sea Scrolls describe a first-century Jewish separatist group, known in Josephus as the Essenes, in ways that verify the historical context of key aspects of John's lifestyle, teachings, and mission. For example, we know from the Dead Sea Scrolls the Essenes employed Isaiah 40 verse 3 to characterize their historical role. A voice cries, "In the wilderness prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God." A verse which the baptizer also famously applies to himself. Neither Josephus nor the evangelists record the baptizer as performing any miracles, and at one point in the fourth gospel, the crowds following Jesus expressly call attention to this fact. If, as a skeptic might suppose, the evangelists frequently embellish their narratives of Jesus and his disciples with fanciful miracle stories, then why not also do the same for the forerunning prophet John, especially since the evangelists associate John with Elijah, who performed many miracles. John is recorded in multiple Gospels as expressing doubts while in prison about whether Jesus was the Messiah. Given the evangelist's emphasis on John's role as the initial certifier of Jesus' messianic status, it's unlikely they would invent this account of his later doubts. John's Gospel records that some of the apostles had followed the baptizer before Jesus, and that some of John's remaining disciples viewed Jesus as a threat to John's popularity and influence. If the fourth evangelist is freely rewriting history, why include this account of petty territorialism? The teachings and sayings of the baptizer recorded in the Gospels and Acts are pithy, stylized, and coherent with everything else we know about John's mission, character, and context. The theological power and moral urgency of these teachings, together with the baptizer's eccentric lifestyle and public challenge to the political religious leadership of Israel, account for John's popular status as a prophet among both Jews and Christians for many decades thereafter. In short, we have multiple Jewish and Christian first-century sources which present a coherent picture of both the baptizer and his context, and the Gospels not only fail to add no obvious miraculous embellishment to John's deeds, but even include a few potentially discrediting stories that could easily have been excluded from their accounts. But whatever conclusion one arrives at regarding the credibility of some of these details, it's imperative not to pass over the most salient aspect of John the Baptizer's witness from the evangelist perspective. Since John believed Messiah's arrival was imminent, he also assumed the judgment of God was imminent, as the prophets had described. And this judgment was a danger to all Jews because everyone was tainted by sin. Only through repentance, symbolized by baptism, could one be assured of deliverance from judgment on Messiah's arrival, when he would pour out God's Spirit to empower humanity's moral transformation. Unlike the Hebrew prophets, John wasn't asserting that the Messianic era would arrive someday, but that it had arrived in his day and through his mission. And yet he denied that he himself was Messiah, but claimed only to be the immediate forerunner of Messiah. Jesus was eventually baptized by John and declared to be Messiah by the same. Yet Jesus went on to become immensely popular for his own extraordinary teachings, his miraculous healings, crucifixion, and purported resurrection. So what makes John such a credible witness to this claim? The demonstrable historical fact that Hebrew prophets who long preceded the baptizer had declared Messiah wouldn't come alone, but as a kind of pair, a forerunning prophet preparing the road and Messiah traveling that same road shortly thereafter. Yet no messianic claimant in the historical record has had a forerunning prophet announce and introduce him to Israel as Jesus did. Further, each of these individuals of this messianic pair were widely popular and influential in their own teachings and missions. If it were easy to orchestrate this state of affairs, there'd be a panoply of messianic duos through history. It's one thing for a single person to become a widely popular religious figure for their teachings and mission, but it's unprecedented within Israelite history for two figures to become so popular in this specific relationship. If there had been no John the Baptizer, Jesus would be easily disqualified as a serious messianic claimant. But since the two men are a prophetically described, inextricably linked, and historically unprecedented pair, one is confronted with solid evidence that Jesus is the only messianic claimant in history to be taken seriously. I hope this is helpful to you in some way, and I'll respond to thoughtful questions and criticisms in the comments section. In our next video, we'll look at Jesus' first miracle where he turned water into wine.